Yes, I'm Rebecca Grome. I'm an audiologist and I own Ears for You Hearing Services. We're at the Brentwood location. We have 2 locations for Ears for You. And one of them is 100 Oaks, Berry Hill location. And it kind of got started off, a lot of musician patients at that one. And then the Brentwood office opened. There was a huge need for a tinnitus provider down here. So I moved down here, I live down here, so I decided why not open a second location closer to home. And so the Brentwood location is more so the tinnitus location. AI is such a big topic of conversation right now, and we've had AI in hearing aids for a long time. And it's more been on the back end of tracking data usage. So for example, if someone comes into my office and they're saying, oh, I don't like my hearing aids for XYZ reason, if I look at their data logging and they're only wearing their hearing aid 1 hour a day, then that conversation is very different than if they're wearing, the hearing aid 12 hours a day. So we've had some tracking in the hearing aids for a long time, but now with the current AI protocol, we're essentially able to double process speech and background noise, which is the #1 complaint that patients who are coming to see us have. They don't come to see us because their refrigerator isn't loud enough for them. They have a hard time in restaurants or at church. And so what the AI filters are doing now is, instead of everything being processed in one processor, there's a secondary chip on the hearing aids now that when you go into a restaurant or when you're in background noise, it will identify after a certain noise floor that speech is too complex, and it will push the speech over to a separate processor, clean up the signal, and then bring it back over and then present it to the ear. So it's really interesting how they got there from a research standpoint, and it's really just kind of cleaning up the signal when you're in high noise environments as well. Instantaneously, yes. So the most recent AI hearing aid launch, for example, they have 13.5 million approved AI sound samples in their secondary processor. And just interesting how AI works in terms of AI is learned behavior. So when a sound comes in, there are 13.5 million preloaded soundscapes that the hearing aid instantaneously says, oh, this lines up with this soundscape, and we were 90% or 99% match on filtering out background noise, and so I'm going to apply this filter and then push it back over. It's really crazy. Mainly restaurants. Restaurants is kind of the biggest one. When you go into a restaurant, I think it's really hard for a hearing aid user to remember what it was like with normal hearing. So everyone goes into a restaurant and they struggle to understand, especially here in Nashville. The restaurants are very, very loud. They are going for more aesthetics than acoustics. And so me, as a normal hearing person, if I go on a date with my husband and we're in a really noisy restaurant, oftentimes I can't hear what he's saying, and he's right across the table from me. And so with AI and the hearing aids, patients, I think, are looking for AI to be a quick fix in terms of that correction factor. But we have to remember that hearing aids are not your processing in your brain. It's cleaning up the signal for you, and then it's presenting a signal. But if your brain can't process it, or you're in a noisy situation to the point where someone with normal hearing is struggling, then they're still going to struggle in that environment as well. But it's really interesting. If you have normal hearing and you listen to the AI hearing aid, you can hear the switch when the AI kicks on. It's kind of like a voided sound, and then you get a really nice clean speech signal. So it's working very well for patients. Yeah, adoption rate of hearing aids is very low. So market penetration rate for hearing aids has always hovered around 20% of people in need. So it's a good time to kind of start educating on the importance of correcting hearing. There's a lot of recent articles that have come out about the association between cognitive decline and untreated hearing loss. And around the same time that happened, there was also a deregulation of prescriptive level hearing aids. So that's when over-the-counter products came out. So there's a lot of confusion in the market. It's really hard for people to kind of navigate where they should look and who they should trust, and if the need is really to the point where they are requiring amplification. So my advice on people who are kind of starting the process of looking at hearing aids for the first time anyways, they need to find a licensed audiologist who follows best practice protocols. There's only about 20% of us who actually do that. It's just us being extra. And there are plenty of resources online where you can type in best practice protocol or real ear verification measurements and find a provider who follows that protocol. Now, for established hearing aid users, I completely understand that hearing aids, unfortunately, are a luxury because they cost so much money. And so, that can be a conversation that can be had with their current provider on whether or not the data logging in their current hearing aid is warranting their own personal environment is in speech and noise a certain amount of time. So most people only spend about 30% of their day in a speech and noise environment where the hearing aid is classifying that there's a high noise with a dominant speech signal. So that's something that any audiologist can look up in a hearing aid and say, oh, you're actually at that 30% mark. Maybe AI would be a good option for you because it's going to help you in 30% of your environment. Now, if you are someone who is sitting at home watching TV and your data logging only shows that you're in speech and noise 10% of the time, AI hearing aids might not be worth the investment on you. Are you going to hear better in background noise? Of course you are. But from an investment standpoint, it really should be a conversation matching up with lifestyle. And that's how we come to the conclusion of whether or not this is recommended for patients. I think there's a common misconception of what AI actually is, and it is self-learning from a computer. And again, that has been around for a very long time. We have been able to teach computers how to respond appropriately for many years. And the way that that works for hearing aids is everything is digitally coded. So when a sound comes in, it has a digital makeup. Think of like a shading of black to white. So how much on the gray scale is it falling? And so what we can do from a manufacturer standpoint is they take an incoming signal, they get the coding spectrum on it, and then they have the computer say what the computer thinks it is. And then through technology, that computer can learn with accuracy response whether or not it's appropriately matching up and responding based on the digital coding. So I think a lot of people get really uncomfortable with AI because they're like, oh, there's someone watching me, or there's kind of like an internal monitoring going on, or there's it's going to be, this information is going to be used in a non-consensual way. And that's really not how it works for hearing aids. Hearing aids, it's, those sound samples have already been vetted and put on that chip. And so the chip is what it is. It's not storing your personal data. It's not storing any of your specific sound preferences, but it is taking what's coming into your hearing aid based on your lifestyle and applying offset defaults and then cleaning the signal up for you. Now, data logging, which I talked about before, where it's kind of like self-learning from your specific environment, we have to consent to that for every single patient that's fit. When we hook up a hearing aid, it's like, do you consent to data log? Yes or no? And most people are fine with us kind of monitoring things on the back end because it just gives us more information about their specific sound environment. It's changed a lot. So I used to work at a hearing aid manufacturer before I bought Ears for You hearing services in 2018. And so I worked at one of the hearing aid manufacturers for about 7 years. And I'm going to be very honest in saying that manufacturers launch stuff about once a year, and there's always this huge hype about how amazing it is and all of these new features. It's a marketing pun. They have to create excitement to get people excited. They have to get professionals excited about their product. Big launches really only happen about once every 4 years. And so AI was first launched last year in 2024. And before that, we had kind of a bigger broadband manufacturer launch 2 years prior to that. So technology is changing rapidly, and our ability to monitor research is changing. And so hearing aids by default are just getting cleaner, faster, smarter. And then for me as a professional, it's really great because if someone comes in with a complaint, I have more things in the background. I have more tools in the background in the software to make adjustments when they're having problems. But it's really interesting when someone comes in with maybe a 5-year-old hearing aid and they're kind of just waiting for that hearing aid to really stop working before they invest in new technology. It is almost blinding to them. They're like, oh, this is so clean and clear and crisp in comparison to what they were before. So, people used to upgrade hearing aids about every 5 to 7 years prior, and now they're upgrading faster just because technology is just taken off and things just sound so much better.